because of how debt spirals, like we talked about before, with interest rates going up because of how much debt you already have, the point where things could spiral is near, and that getting to 130% of GDP, that's really flirting with the line where things could really spiral up to that unsustainable level of debt. Hello everyone, it's our second version of these news episodes, and there's a lot to talk about in there, Charlie.
There is an absolute lot, because given that we've only done like once a month and the amount of stuff that comes out, we are working overtime. There's only so much that we can do to keep up with the absolute onslaught that is America, UK, Europe, but we're doing our best.
Just to remind you of the format, it's going to be 15 minutes. We're going to talk today roughly about 10 minutes about the One Big Beautiful Bill. Yes, it's called that. That is the tax bill in America, which is very controversial. We're going to link into that, talking about the credit rating downgrade of the US, which is a big deal for the world's reserve currency. And then finally, we'll cap it off with Labour's changes to immigration, which sort of flew under the radar a bit, but it's big changes, and you would think Reform voters would be happy.
Sounds like a big, beautiful podcast, Jack. Let's get going.
So, Charlie, you're in charge of time. Please tell me if I've got to speed up.
Absolutely.
Just give me eyebrows.
Well, then speed up, Jack. We're already 30 seconds in. We need to speed up.
Sorry, bud. So what is this One Big Beautiful Bill doing? It's doing a lot. It's cutting taxes in a lot. Well, actually, it's continuing the tax cuts that were made in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. We'll talk about those changes. But also, it's cutting a lot of spending in some areas and then increasing spending in others. The big top line figure, though, is how much this is increasing debt. Because this is increasing debt by nearly 3 trillion, or roughly 5 trillion if made permanent. It's increasing the deficit, so that's the yearly, people know what deficit is, 7% to 7% by 2026. It's increasing debt from 100% of GDP today to possibly 133% by 2034 if interest rates remain high and a lot of the changes remain permanent, which I imagine the Republicans would want it to do. That's a big increase, for everyone at home. Is this a good time, Charlie, to talk about how this affects credit ratings?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I mean, all of the major credit rating agencies have downgraded the US. Which is a big deal given it's the world's reserve currency and it's got the most powerful central bank who can print money essentially to be able to cover any debts that are outstanding. But all of these, despite that, all these credit agencies have still downgraded the US from their top ranking to the one below. Even Moody's, the most reputable one, has increased it from AAA to now AA1. And this is the first time Moody's has given the US anything other than a AAA rating since 1917. And this basically signifies that Moody's, who have very skilled economists and mathematicians, basically say that they're more likely to default on their debt than they ever have been in history. And this is at a time where the US is brinkering at the edge of recession. JP Morgan estimates that about 40% chance the US enters a recession this year. And fundamentally, this just makes US debt more expensive. If people expect people to not pay the US to not repay their debt, then they're less likely to buy up debt, and that makes it more expensive for the US government. And that essentially takes away one of the main levers that has driven the US to the top of the world over the last century.
Yes, so a bit scary.
Very scary.
And this is coming off the back of our debt episode where we talked about there being a point where debts become unsustainable. I believe I was looking at a Wall Street Journal YouTube video, so not the greatest source, but you get the idea, saying that this point where it becomes unsustainable is about 180 to 200% of GDP is where it's unsustainable. But that because of how debt spirals, like we talked about before, with interest rates going up because of how much debt you already have, that the point where things could spiral is near, and that Trump getting to 130% of GDP, that's really flirting with the line where things could really spiral up to that unsustainable level of debt where it just catapults into the sky, right?
Yeah, so, and that's similar levels to Japan currently, and they are currently having problems with their debt. So
you get the idea that this is concerning. This is not what Republicans normally stand for, which is to be, quite tight-belted with things. So this is quite radical, I would say. But so I did a little bit of analysis looking at the tax changes, the continued tax changes from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was messing about basically with the boundaries of where the marginal tax rates are and what those marginal tax rates have changed to. And what I found is that for a single person, that if you're on 30k, it's going to increase your disposable income, post-tax income, by roughly 2.4%. If you're on 60k, it's going up by 3.1%. If you're on 160k, it's going up by 3.9%. You start to get a pattern here that the rich are slightly benefiting a little bit more from this than the poor. then you also see that there's a weird thing that at 300k, when you're single, you're only getting a 0.6% increase in your disposable income. Something weird happening there, because at that same point, you're now, if you were a rich married couple, you would be getting 5.8% increase in your disposable income. So there's something weird there where it seems to be encouraging people to be basically rich married couples, which I don't know, that fits quite well into the narrative of Project 2025, something that was trying to push quite conservative values on America. I don't know if this is coincidence, but Charlie, I've sent over the graph to you of how the disposable income looks. It's pretty mental, right?
And it almost looks, like we said before, it looks almost back calculated in the sense they wanted a particular result and they've got it by implementing this very specific policy. And it's really quite scary that Conservatives want to get involved. I personally think getting involved in people's marriage lives is not a role for the government, but Trump obviously thinks it is.
And then just to cap it off, if you're earning $1 million or over as a married couple, you're getting a 4.7% increase in your disposable income based on these tax changes. Yeah. So that's quite a big difference from if you were earning in the bottom decile.
Absolutely.
Okay. So my crude analysis was just looking at one part of the bill, which is the tax changes. But if we look at everything, which includes the changes to spending, because Medicaid, which is I guess Obama's attempt at bringing something like the NHS to America, which sort of fills in the gaps where there are people that would be uninsured for healthcare. That's been cut really quite badly, such that around 10 million, I've seen lower figures, 8 million, some higher, 11 million Americans to lose access to Medicaid, which is nearly 3% of the population. That's huge.
That's absolutely
these
insane.
people are losing their access to healthcare. You can imagine how that's going to affect them. And if you include that on their income, so think about like how much that's worth to them, then you see that by 2029, that the lowest decade are actually losing 4% of resources, because this is counteracting all the benefit from lower taxes for them. But also the richest are gaining 3% from these changes. So this is really quite bad for income distribution, I would say, and at the same time is boosting debt. Sounds a lot like Liz Truss's government, to be honest.
Yep.
Borrowing a lot of debt just to reduce taxes for the rich.
And this obviously needs to go through the Senate, where there'll be round of reviews, and if it fails, it'll go back to the House. And the main area of contention for this is actually Republicans wanting bigger tax cuts to state and local SALT taxes. So they want to cut taxes by more. They also want to cut food stamps by more, so making it even more regressive. And they also want to edit timing to Medicaid adjustments. So broadly, the Republicans are wanting more tax cuts, and it's getting a little bit out of hands. I also wanted to bring, just as we only have a couple of minutes, just highlight this revenge tax, which is hidden away in this 1,000-page document in section 899, which essentially allows the Trump administration to impose taxes on foreign companies that they say impose unfair or discriminatory taxes on US companies. And essentially it allows the US to impose taxes on any foreign entity that it likes. This is one sentence in this 1,100-page bill. It's insane. Basically what this does is a response to the UK digital services tax, where the UK essentially said, if Google and these big multinationals are benefiting from search engines in the UK, then we deserve a share of that profit. And this was supposed to be reconciled, this issue, by the OECD, who had a big tax bill under the Biden administration that wanted to consolidate and unify some of the tax legislation and have a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15%, and also share the profits of multinational companies. Trump has got rid of that, and so the UK had to respond with this digital service tax, and it's now led to this revenge tax, which has caused absolute pandemonium and looks really, really scary, and it's basically a restriction on capital into the US, and stock markets have reacted very, very badly. They estimate that if you bake this into stock market predictions, there could be a 10% stock market sell-off if people fully understand the implications of this revenge tax. So very, very scary and almost quite authoritarian.
That is scary. And sorry, I've missed something on corporation tax as well, which is that part of the tax changes, if you weren't worried enough about the income tax things, you can now think about tax on business, which originally the highest rate was 29%. Now there's a flat corporation tax rate of 21%, which is actually higher than the lowest tax. So it's, again, hurting the smaller companies and benefiting the rich ones. So you've got the same narrative over and over again. And it's just funny, I think funny, comparing the magnitudes of the numbers to what Doge was planning and actually managed to cut. So this is Elon Musk before he left. He was trying to cut a lot of waste in the government. Struggled to do so. It was less like using a scalpel and more like a madman with a chainsaw, which is actually not a metaphor. That's actually what he was. So compare the number of 5 trillion, which is how much this is increasing debt, to Doge only managing current estimated savings of 160 billion. So quite big difference in magnitudes.
Brilliant.
So anyway,
that's a good place to leave it there. That's pretty much bang on.
I think people get the
10
picture, right? 10 minutes. Oh,
Yeah.
golden. Right. So that means we've
Beautiful.
got 5 minutes to talk about immigration.
Absolutely. And you're the expert on this one, Jack, so I'm going to let you take this one away.
Yeah, so this one flew under the radar a little bit, didn't it? So let me start with some context about why people care so much about immigration, which is when we voted for Brexit, and well, not we, I didn't, and I'm not sure about you. Net immigration was under 300k, and if you're looking at 1990s, it was in double digits, right? Well, yeah, low. Whereas in 2023, it had ballooned to over 800k. Now, that is roughly 1.2% of population. So you can see that people started having problem not just with illegal immigration, but with legal migration. And this was mainly caused, interestingly, by non-EU study and work visas. So this is not the EU problem. This is actually something else. And this is especially work visas to do with health and social work, which the requirement for your skill level was reduced quite a lot so that you could fill shortages. So that's the main entry route for a lot of these people. So Labour's strategy, what they're doing with this new immigration bill, well, it's making it basically impossible for you to immigrate here unless you're highly skilled. That is essentially the strategy we're seeing here. And the way they're doing that is they've kept the minimum income thresholds that Tories had set. So that was changing the minimum threshold you needed to get a work visa to come over here to 38.7k, which has increased from 26.2k. That's a big increase and this change was made in April 2024, 1 month before the election. So Tories didn't get any of the benefit of this policy at all. There's also it's the minimum of that or the going rate for each occupation, which is calculated as the median of UK earnings for that sector, which is again up from the 25th percentile as it was originally. So you can see that to come over you need to earn quite a lot of money straight off the bat. Also, they've removed the salary threshold discount, so certain sectors were getting discounts on that money. That's gone, so you have to earn at least 38.7k, again higher than the salary I'm expecting at least for my first job. They're ending the social care visa, which again I said was one of the main ways people were coming in. And already we've seen that the number of health and social care worker visas granted for main applicants and their dependents fell by 237,000, so about 2/3 in 2024 compared to 2023. That's a sizable chunk, and that's contributed to why net migration has basically halved now this year to 2024 to just over 400k. So a big cut has been from targeting that specific ends. But the point really, I could go into more extra bits that are in the bill, but the outcome here is that once enforced, the only immigrants coming here will be high skills or students, and in both cases they'll be young, which means they definitely won't be committing more crime, they won't be cheating our benefit system, they won't be using our public services much, they won't be stealing your jobs or depressing your wages. So I think that's the point here that I would like to say to the right wing, that once these things are in, I don't really know what more you want from them, because none of your arguments work anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if they wanted to go a little bit more draconian than that and reduce immigration by more, that's where you're more likely to see the negative effects of stopping immigration coming in, right? Presumably, if you're getting rid of those incredibly high-skilled people coming in, there's no real benefit in removing them. Yeah,
I think the only bit left for the right-wing media then would be the illegal immigration, which I believe came up to about 38,000, which would become a much bigger proportion. If we do reduce it now to let's say 250,000, that becomes like a fifth of immigration, which would be quite high.
Yeah, and obviously in terms of messaging, that creates some relatively scary numbers, doesn't it, that the right-wing could use. Even though the absolute number hasn't changed, you could say it's a higher percentage, and that's good for political messaging, possibly.
Exactly. So they could say that. I've got a couple extra bits I could say, Charlie. Do we have time, or should we wrap it up?
Not really. I just wanted, not really. We just have like a minute or so. So I'm just going to say, if yay or nay, are you in pro of the bill, against it from your perspective?
Too strong for me. I think this is limiting it too harshly. That's my honest view.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Jack. And now I actually understand what the bill is now, so that's good.
Good stuff. Right, see you, everyone.
Hello everyone, this is Charlie, Jack's better half. If you like the episode, please do consider giving us a like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and a follow and a 5-star if you're on Spotify. It really does help us out. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the episode.